Hi, everybody. This is Irma Jennings, and welcome to the call. So, some of you know me, some of you don't. My name is Irma Jennings. I'm a health coach and osteoporosis patient navigator. I find doctors for my clients who will listen to them, actually listen to them, and help them explore the root cause for their illnesses, whether or not it's osteoporosis or gut health, and search for, as I said, search for the root cause, especially around osteoporosis. But we know that osteoporosis is one of many illnesses that are attached to osteoporosis. My clients are all over the country, but I want to tell you, I met Dr. Cohen about 10 years ago through a program called the Suppers Program, which was originated in Princeton, New Jersey, by a magnificent woman, Dorothy Mullen. And Dorothy Mullen initiated the program basically out of her kitchen table, aiming to assist individuals in adapting healthier eating habits by focusing on whole, unprocessed foods and fostering supportive community gatherings while cooking together. She was an extraordinary woman. Dorothy found doctors who were willing to use their prescription pad for their patients to write a script to come to the suppers program. And that's what Dr. Cohen did. Dr. Ellie Cohen is a triple board certified physician in rheumatology, internal medicine, and integrative medicine, and one of the country's leading medicine and legal experts in environmental health. In addition to lecturing on environmental health at universities, medical schools, and physician training programs, yay for that, she is on the faculty of the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine, Southern California University of Health Sciences, and the University of California in Irvine. Today, Dr. Cohen manages the Smart Human Social Platform, media platform, which is an incredible avenue to go into and resource to listen to some of her interviews. Actually, that's when I first heard about Dr. Cohen's father, who she may talk about tonight. And she has a podcast, and she created and continues, the podcast that she created is there as well. I guess the podcast is the Smart Human, right? That's the podcast.
Yes. The whole
And,
platform and the podcast, everything is the smart human.
and that's where we're going towards. We're going towards becoming smart humans. And she continues to see patients in her medical practice in Princeton, New Jersey, where she lives on a farm with her husband, two sons, and lots of furry friends. So this is Dr. Cohen's third book that she wrote on the topic. This is the most recent one that we're going to be talking about, Detoxify. This is a must. It's written for us consumers, so it's a great book and it has solutions. It's a wonderful book. Then she did this other book, Non-Toxic Guide to Living Healthy in a Chemical World, with her co-author, Frederick von Sol. And then this is the academic book that she has. So also with Frederick von Sol. So you see that she's written, she knows her stuff, and she sees patients, and a lot of this information originated from not only your dog, but also from your patients. So I'm going to tell you how we're going to set up the call. We're going to have about 45 minutes of Dr. Cohen presenting. Vicky will take questions in the chat. If you have questions about products, don't put them in because Dr. Cohen is not a product. She's not product specific. She's general. I'm going to share a couple of things if time is available to show how we use our cleaning products and what we use to clean our veggies. And also, if you have a personal question like, oh, can I just ask you about me? Don't do it because this is not the place for that. Dr. Cohen is not your doctor. And again, this is an educational presentation, but we welcome questions. All right, so I will bow out and I'll let you take the lead.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And I am going to go ahead and share slides. And what I wanted to mention is that, I'm going to be doing a little bit of ad-libbing. Let's see, continue to share with PowerPoint, continue. There we go. So can you see my slides, everyone? Okay.
Yes.
And I kind of like to work a little bit ad-libby because now do you see this bar here or is that only me seeing that?
Nope, don't see it.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to throw in things a little bit along the way, and please save questions if you can for the end because I will try to get to all of them, but it just kind of keeps the flow going. And this topic is a really broad topic, not just chemicals, but bone health. And then I'm going to give you solutions. I want to talk about a lot of the stuff that I write in much more detail in the book. So a little bit of this is going to be kind of to whet your appetite, but I certainly want you guys to get enough out of this to make it worth your time. So I'm going to get going. All right, here we go. So I'm going to start with my first child. This is Truxton, Sir Commodore Truxton Lewis. I live in the barn named after Sir Commodore Truxton. And he was my 4.5-year-old golden retriever. And about 15 years ago, he became really sick. And I had two young kids. I had a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. And he was my 4.5-year-old puppy. And turns out he had autoimmune hepatitis, which we found out relatively quickly. And that is so unusual for dogs, by the way. We see it in humans, of course, but it's so unusual for dogs and especially golden retrievers. And so I always put up his slide whenever I can because I wanted people to understand where the beginning of my journey began, because I don't think I would be doing anything in environmental health, nor would I be probably chatting with you tonight if it wasn't for the fact that this dog became sick and at a young age with a disease he should never have gotten, and then opened up the doors for me to explore what might have turned his immune system against himself, which is how autoimmune diseases work. And he did not live beyond another 6 months, but he was comfortable. And it turns out that I learned a lot about what water he drank in terms of quality, the food he ate in terms of the quality. I researched the plastic red toy in his mouth to look for answers, and I uncovered a enormous amount of information on not just how animals are unprotected in the US from environmental chemicals and a lot of things, but really about how humans are unprotected. And it was so earth-shattering and eye-opening because here I was a practicing physician, an immune disease specialist nonetheless, and not once had I ever heard that environment, air, water, food, cosmetics, cleaning, none of it had anything to do with human health conditions. So this is a slide, hopefully that didn't echo. This is a slide that I use for the TED Talk that anyone can look up on YouTube if they just type my name. And this was a slide that really illustrated how many chemicals or compounds, even healthy asparagus or anything of the sort, affect us in a given day. And it's an enormous amount. And if you calculate, say 27 was the number I used, for the TED Talk. When I added up 24 or 27 chemicals in a day, multiplied it by a week, multiplied it by a month, multiplied it by a year, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, we're talking of millions of exposures. So to not have the data that connects many of our most common exposures to health issues, if it existed, was just astounding to me. Now, our lifetime of exposures really starts in the womb, right? We call this the exposome. Basically, is your lifetime exposures from basically creation all the way to death, and it can include not just chemicals, but radiation, all of our cell phone technology, travel on airplanes. It includes stress and how that affects our health overall, mental health, but also our gut microbiome and changes in the pH, those type of exposures, but also infections, which are part of the human experience, and medications can change a lot of our health, risks due to exposure, and we'll talk about that in terms of bone. But it's really just a motley crew of exposures. What I really wanted to focus in over the last 15 years was how does this actually play into human health on a very reasonable basic level at different age groups, because of those vulnerabilities. And then most recently with Detoxify, my new book, I really was honing in on immune and autoimmune disorders and how so little is talked about in terms of the chemical effects on the immune system. But the endocrine system has certainly been what my last two books and most of the literature has been up until this date been written about. And when we talk about endocrine disrupting chemicals as they're coined, these are chemicals that have, and they're generally synthetic, although there are some natural forms of EDCs, like in soy, like genistein and some others, that have the ability to modulate hormones. But real true synthetic compounds that are endocrine disrupting chemicals have this really uncanny finding of being able to mimic hormones in the human body, especially estrogen. at very low levels. And that can throw off the signaling of all of our hormones, which are essentially signalers. They're messenger signalers that have been part of our evolution for millions of years. They're very conserved in terms of the fact that they have enormous biologic effects with very small doses of those hormones being utilized. And that's exactly how some of these endocrine disrupting chemicals work, is that there's such low levels that you would not think, have any effects on the human body in various processes, but they can actually affect big physiologic processes, growth and development, infertility or fertility, thyroid function, adrenal function, bone development, bone growth, bone breakdown, bone remodeling. But really, even sugar usage in terms of insulin being a hormone. We also, I'll talk about that, getting into how the immune system are affected by many of the same chemicals, not all, but many. And the thing about, developmental risk is that, when, there are periods of life that are more vulnerable than others. Children, for instance, are uniquely vulnerable because they're smaller, and pound for pound, they have greater exposures to air, to water, to food. They have hand to mouth behavior. They're on the ground where dust settles, and dust is has been well studied to be a big area where lots of chemicals in your home, be it furniture, flame retardants, be it cleaning products, where things that are in the air fresheners, those chemicals, smoke chemicals, they will end up on surfaces that will end up in dust, and that certainly sticks to paws and to kids' toys. They also have a lack of variety in their diet. And as I'm going to try to share in this presentation, but certainly much deeper in the book, there's a whole chapter on nutrition and how the variety of your diet, the compounds that we experience through life, food is medicine. That is a really key player in terms of detoxifying, in terms of offsetting some of the risks to these exposures. Kids also have immature metabolism, so they don't have the elevated level of detoxification liver processes that adults have. And they're also continuously developing. So there's lots of room for problems to happen as the brain is developing, the reproductive system is developing, and so on. Let me just move this bar here. And also future years of life. So they're experiencing chemicals at much younger ages that say maybe an 80 or 90 or 100-year-old right now would say they ever experienced in their vulnerable periods of their youth. So it's kind of a different setup now that they're being born into these chemicals and this environmental world. And as I mentioned, there's these vulnerable periods of development that have been identified where hormones are really up and down, where they're getting developed and they're breaking down, and there's lots of growth. One of those is the prenatal experience. The other is toddlers, as you can imagine, but teenagers. And this is where I did a lot of my data for 2 pilot projects at Princeton High School to learn about teenagers. Teenagers, obviously, I have 2 myself. Their hormones are going up and down all the time. And what's so interesting is they also experience the most chemical exposure because by just merely their product choices, they use the most personal care products per 24 hours than any other demographic. I mean, you just come into my house on any given day and you'll smell, 40 different products, which of course I pick my battles as a mother and try to make sure that, we work through it. In high schools where I teach, I actually, and I've taught my sons to do this, they look up their products and they can choose better products based on those very vetted resources that are in the book, but also what I share with you guys today. I'll be sharing those resources like environmental working groups, Skin Deep database, and so on. But also one of the other vulnerable periods of exposures happens to be menopause. And again, it's another one of those periods where there's variations in hormone release, usage, breakdown. And so most people don't think of that as a vulnerable period, but in fact it is. And it's also another opportunity to intervene when it comes to environmental health. Now, I wanted to put in a couple papers that I thought were really interesting. This one's really excellent by Joseph Pizzorno, who's an environmental naturopath, very, very well known. He created the Bastyr University, and he's just a lovely, lovely guy. But he did a wonderful paper on, particularly he focuses a lot on heavy metals, cadmium, lead, and mercury, but he does a lot of work with arsenic, which is very common in rice. It's also common in drinking water. But we're going to get to solutions. I just wanted people to know about this particular paper, 2021, and I can certainly try to supply that as well. I have it in my notes. But essentially, let me step back for a second. Let's talk about chemicals in the first place. In the United States, the going number that we estimate is about 100,000 synthetic chemicals that are currently used in all the products we love, whether it's cosmetics or building materials, industrial chemicals, solvents, paints, paint thinners, cosmetics, did I mention? But also our food. We have about 10,000 food chemicals, food additive chemicals that are actually not really regulated. They're not required to have any testing amongst all of these 100,000. These are really important. It's important to know that the US does not require manufacturers to test these chemicals before they go into products that we use every day that are on store shelves. And in fact, if a product makes your hair fall out and it's on the shelf, the US government doesn't have the ability to pull it from shelves. This is not food. This is not medication, which is where they could intervene, but this is essentially up to the manufacturers to voluntarily remove those products from the shelf. So we are so unregulated when it comes to our everyday products. The only real regulations we have the FDA for medications. We have USDA certification in our food system, which I'll tell you is so valuable for a lot of reasons. And we have some EPA recommendation, oversight in terms of our water system that's so limited, it's really kind of not worthwhile when it comes to human health. And that's it. And that's such a surprising statement, information to many people. And it was to me, which is why it took 15 years to really, get into this material. So when it comes to heavy metals, basically some of the recommendations I want to make, and I'm going to go through these with a little less verbiage here on the slide, but essentially there's lots of chemicals that get into our bones. Some of them happen to be heavy metals. And then there's other aspects of other chemicals like BPA, that are plasticizers that are in canned foods. They all can have different effects in terms of bone health. But when it comes to heavy metals, some of the recommendations, and maybe I should have put this later on, but we certainly know that the chemicals in smoke, cigarette smoke, firsthand, secondhand, and even thirdhand, which is when it settles on surfaces, can contain hundreds of chemicals, including formaldehyde, benzene, but also heavy metals. We would certainly thinking about heavy metals that come in seafood. Seafood is one of those areas where it's variable by state, by size of the fish. If it's a bigger fish in general, it will contain more bioaccumulated chemicals, including heavy metals like methylmercury, as well as PCBs and other ocean contaminants, even microplastics. And we want to think about even how our food is grown in terms of fertilizers. And that's why eating organic food actually can really make a difference. And frozen USDA organics tend to be incredibly valuable because not only do they have the certification of having USDA removed, thousands of chemicals in the pesticide category that are not allowed to be used not only on spraying but in the soil that this produce is used, but frozen organic products are accessible. They're in every big box store nationally, and they also maintain all of their nutrient value because they're frozen the second that they're picked. In fact, we have here in central New Jersey, one of the biggest spinach farmers is a neighbor, and he told me the process. They calculate to the minute when they're going to pick their spinach, and they race it to the huge ice containers. And get it ready to pack and send it off. So there's like a really specialized process, and that locks in a lot of those nutrients. So in a modern day food system where food travels for such long distances, whether it's organic or not, you're losing nutrient value at every step along that way. And so that's why I'm really saying it's sad but true that frozen organics really are the new way of getting the best, highest quality food, unless you have, farmers that are picking it that morning, especially in this season, we're lucky to have that, or growing your own. We want to be careful of, not collecting chemicals on our feet and our shoes. Pesticides, fertilizers, a lot of times we don't think much about shoes, but we carry some of those chemicals into our house. And certainly dusting and getting rid of, managing air filters. MERV filtration systems, basically most default MERV filters for HVAC systems are at 5 to 9. We want to think more like a 12, 13, 14. I think it goes up to 16. And that's what I told people out when they were dealing with the fires in California, is that increasing the MERV level is actually going to do better for the air quality, which, you're going to breathe in some of these chemicals at some point, including heavy metals. Um,
But Dr. Ailey, I want
yes.
to go back to one thing that you're talking about, not allowing outdoor shoes to be worn inside the house. So if you have that, if you've established a no shoe household, or if you have shoes in the household, what do you do with your animals when they come?
Oh, well, this is a whole big, these are options because no one follows my recommendations of the bucket outside the house. And for pets, you really do need to either, and look, in New York City, they all have these little footies on their
Yeah,
shoes.
yeah, do,
I
yeah.
mean, we just don't do that here because we assume that grass and any of the sidewalks are cleaner in the suburbs. But in fact, if you really want to be thinking about your neighbors with the little insect signs that we have, and they have a big X, you really don't want to be walking your pets on sprayed land.
So you're talking about like rinsing your feet, your doggy's feet off when
Yeah, sure. Or having specialized little padded shoes when you go out, if you're going to be walking them regularly. Look, this is all work, but I'm hoping to give people sort of less work in terms of life, like life changes.
right?
Um,
And the filters, you recommend changing those filters how often? Those
it depends on the filtration system. It also depends on how much air, square footage you're dealing with. And really, you get that information mostly from an HVAC person who's teaching and getting that set up for you. So that would be a recommendation, I believe. And also in terms of winter versus summer, if you're opening windows and doors, you may not need to change it as much depending on what your environment is. If you're a city person, if you're so there's lots of variables, but I like everything on 3 and 6 month, change arounds. But a lot of times systems will tell you, when they're ready to be changed. I would avoid children's jewelry, anything from the 99-cent store. I know it seems easy and fun, but we know that even those beads for Mardi Gras are loaded with cadmium, loaded with lead. So you really want to avoid overseas toys as a means of removing some of these heavy metals. Um, and I'm going to keep going because some of this is a little too obtuse. Okay, so now I want to talk about the immune system. And here's the thing: when it comes to bones, the bones are really managed as a rheumatologist. I'm dealing with osteoporosis all the time, and prevention. And what we need to know is not just hormones are involved in the process of bone remodeling, building, breakdown, managing fractures, growing bone in utero, is that the immune system is intricately involved. So any of the chemicals that affect the immune system potentially can wreak havoc on bone processes. Okay. Now, with the immune system, we know that inflammation is a catchword that people have heard of. We're pretty aware of it. But the question is it, kind of the chicken or the egg? Is inflammation increasing our risk of these diseases, or are these diseases also contributing to inflammatory components of the body? So there's kind of a back and forth here. Needless to say, inflammation certainly has been implicated in the increase of bone loss over time. And so we want to be thinking about that. And then what are the upstream reasons for that? Are we causing it for ourselves, or is it something, like medications can potentially do that? And certainly our food and water and air choices. So we'll talk about that. But the goal is to reduce inflammation and subsequently reduce risk for a whole host of immune-related conditions.
Let
Uh,
me, let me let me say something about the inflammation because my bones I thought were relatively strong and I had a stomach issue. And all of a sudden my CTX, my C-telepeptide, which is the bone marker for measuring if you're having bone loss, all of a sudden it started to skyrocket. And it was because of the CTX. And yes, I was having some belly issues. I was having some diarrhea. And I knew something was going off, but my bones were impacted, which was real interesting correlation that I saw the immediate reaction because I had a number of inflammatory markers due to blood work. And my bone turnover marker was like, uh-oh, now it's on fire. So that was a real quick view of how quickly this can happen.
Yeah, and listen, is something as simple as even inflammation from exposures that increase your exposure to, say, lead, which is stored in bone, and other components of how we manage the immune system through exposures. Our bodies always are trying to protect itself from exposures in the environment. Those things, we're not going to be always able to do what you did, Irma, which is to sort of check those labs in correlation to our exposures or to our infections. But from a scientific perspective and from case studies, we do know that there's lots of different avenues by which the immune system is affecting bone. Like, for instance, in this particular paper, in terms of the gut microbiota, we know that the gut, 26 feet of bowel, is the largest immune system in the body, and that we've lived with for millions of years trillions of microbes in the human gut. It lines, if you think of the gut as just one big tube, so you can kind of visualize it, the interior lining of this tube is the microbiome. And the healthier we keep that tube with the microbiome layer, which is mold, yeast, virus, bacteria mostly, and all these single-celled organisms, the more we keep that healthy ecosystem, the more it's going to protect what crosses over that tube lining into the bloodstream and cause an inflammatory response. Now, we know things can affect the microbiome, certainly chlorinated drinking water. We know pesticides in food can knock the good guys off, but medications can also do this as well. When we think of medications, one of the most obvious in terms of the gut would be proton pump inhibitors, which we know turn off the acidic environment for good reason. If you have a major bleed or you have an active ulcer, seriously, that's a necessary medication because it works so quickly and effectively. But it's not some type of medicine that you would necessarily want to be on long term without understanding your endpoints and what your goals are. And even as an integrative medicine doctor, there's alternatives to medications. Almost every medication, there's a hack, not always, but certainly many, is certainly for the low level things like reflux. So thinking about things like DGL or deglycyrrhizin, licorice root, slippery elm, aloe, these are all very reasonable integrative medicine approaches to avoid proton pump inhibitors long term, and also subsequently help block the changes that, not mess with the acidic changes of the gut. Because when you turn off acidic cells that create acid for the gut, which we've had for millions of years, you're clearly going to change the ability to pull nutrients from food in the same way. And that's why people with proton pump inhibitors long term tend to have do have higher risk for osteoporotic fractures because they're not absorbing calcium, vitamin D, and other micronutrients and minerals. So that's one of the direct effects from some medications, but certainly environmental chemicals can do those type of activities as well. So you want to keep our microbiome healthy. We don't want to turn off cells. We want to find alternatives to medications wherever they exist, and hopefully they're effective. And the goal is to keep that microbiome really healthy because that keeps our immune system healthy. Now, when it comes to food, as I mentioned, we have over 10 to 12,000 food additives that are now considered, what they've been grandfathered in as what are called GRAS designation, generally recognized as safe, which means it basically they get a pass for being safe because they've never been required to have any testing by the U.S. Regulatory systems for food. There's really under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act of 1938, nothing passed. Again, in 1958, nothing passed in terms of real regulation. And really, there's been no oversight in terms of food chemicals. So that being said, it tends to be a wild, wild west unless you consider, again, USDA organic, which does not allow for synthetic preservatives, colors, additives, chemicals for crunch and mouthfeel. Also, you don't get, you're not allowed to have any genetically modified organisms or ingredients. And so it's something really to think about in terms of food choice. We have such an enormous exposure to Western processed foods, even worldwide, and we have such a consumption, 8 to 10 pounds at least per year of these chemicals. And it can be even on produce. Like I said, it doesn't even have to be the burger and fries you can see. It can be pesticides on kale salad. So thinking about chemicals not just being on the ultra processed, but also in even just produce is really important to consider. When I think about diet, if you really break it down, look at all of the areas in just simply cooking something that we have to consider where toxicity or chemicals can get involved here. It's not it first of all what we cook in terms of again organic or natural, whether it's the macros of protein, carbs, or fats, whether there's any food additives, even if it's natural. Thinking about what we cook, how we clean our food, how we cook our food, and what utensils add, some risk, like nonstick pans and plastic cookware, because all of this is going to get into our gut essentially and possibly mess with the microbiome. And even how we store our food. Food packaging is not ever considered in the equation of toxicity in food and the gut. And I think we need to think much more about how we get these exposures. BPA, for example, was the first endocrine disrupting chemical identified. Fred von Saal, my co-author, world-renowned researcher, emeritus, he was largely responsible, his research and his colleagues, for removing BPA from plastic bottles, baby bottles in 2012. But if it was bad enough to take it out of that product line, why isn't it been taken out of canned foods, which because it lines every can interior, whether it's organic or not. So packaging is separate from the food itself, but we ourselves can make better choices in terms of choosing frozen or fresh and trying to avoid can exposure wherever we can. So thinking about all those exposures to plastics and ceramic, we can't really fix the food system entirely, right? Our food comes packaged unless you grow your own, but it's how you clean it from that moment on that's pretty reasonable that we can do, and how we store in glass and that kind of thing. Again, organic has a lot of teeth in this country. It took about 10 years to develop, starting in 1990. It wasn't until about 2002 that it got really put into the system. And it's got its problems. It's not a perfect system, but it's far better than anything else we have in terms of oversight for cleanliness for our food. Now, you can also choose non-organic produce. You can make your own food washes, which I have do-it-yourself recipes in the book, but this I also have in the book, which is Environmental Working Group's annual Dirty Dozen Clean 15 list. And these are non-organic produce tested across the US. And generally, the Dirty Dozen come up pretty similar every year. These are the produce that's been tested to have the highest level of pesticide residues on the surface versus the Clean 15 that, if not organic, these are the best choices. And as you can see, the Clean 15 tend to have skin on them, right? Pineapple, kiwi, mango, papaya, whereas the Dirty Dozen tend to have a skin to them. So berries, peaches, those type of thing, much more absorbent for the exposures that they may be sprayed with. Now, one of the things I talk about in the book in great detail is nutrition and how that helps to offset some of the harm from chemical exposures that we may or may not be able to control. And it's really important to understand that food is medicine. And choosing these foods like green leafy vegetables that has vitamin B9, or B9 is very shown to be very effective in reducing some of the genetic, or what we should call epigenetic effects of BPA, because you can't change your genes, you can change your epigenome, which are the proteins that sit on the genes and allow them or not to express themselves. So food is medicine. Iodine sits in the thyroid gland and really offsets some of these other food wash chemicals and very common exposures like perchlorate, nitrate. Being sufficient in iron, calcium, and vitamin C can offset the exposures from lead. Quercetin, which is very similar to vitamin C, comes from onions and apples, skins. Very interesting material on that in terms of papers that offset PCBs and methylmercury, omega-3 fatty acids. And so you can see selenium, really remarkable studies on how enough selenium on a daily basis can offset even heavy metal exposures linked to dementia. So, we have a lot of food as medicine if we just explore it. And make sure that that's the addition to what we're doing, not just taking away chemicals. Cruciferous vegetables, when I talk about and detoxify, some of the most incredible powerhouse chemicals are in vegetables, cruciferous specifically, where they have this ability to upregulate the liver, to really break down some of these exposures, daily exposures, into less harmful products to eliminate. So, these are powerhouses. I argue that it's probably better to get organic or make sure you clean them off from pesticides, or else you're sort of, going against your objective here to detoxify. But there's so many great cruciferous vegetables that are valuable in terms of this process.
Can we go back to that page? Because I want to ask you two questions.
Mhm.
Because I read in the book that you and your husband had glyphosate in your blood.
Hmm.
You took a test, and that you ate cruciferous vegetables every day,
Hmm.
and that assisted in getting the glyphosate and the amount of water that you drank out of your blood. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is part of our regimen, is really a lot of cruciferous vegetables on a daily basis, which we enjoy. I mean, it's not torture. And we have reverse osmosis water filters, which are $300, and we drink a lot of water. And that's a whole chapter in the book, is about how water is so critical and how to get clean water. And so really we were been detoxifying for years, but wouldn't even call it that. We just realized that those were the mechanisms by which they worked. And now we know that that's really critical to just maintenance within a modern day life.
And how much water do you drink a day?
Well, in terms of quantity, I would say I try to get at least 40 to 60 ounces in. But I would say that I'm probably shy of that because I'm so busy. I do make myself drink 20 ounces before my first beloved sip of my tea in the morning, which I kind of challenge myself to make sure that I get at least 20 ounces. Plus, if it's caffeinated drinks that you're drinking, you're going to be more dehydrated. Alcohol, iced tea in the summer, people think it's so refreshing. It's actually incredibly dehydrating. And we don't want to dehydrate for bone health because we need to be, water filled. I mean, our bodies are water filled. We're 85% water. So we need to really get this water thing down, in my opinion.
Are you going to talk about your opinion on water? What is the best approach
Yep.
for water? Okay, we're going to get there, right? We're going to get to
Yes.
the four A's. Okay.
Yes. So I wanted to tie in also how the GI tract, and I know people probably hear a lot about the gut microbiome, but this bone axis is just so incredible in terms of just some of the interplay between, like I said, the gut and what are the sort of the effects of the gut that lead into bone strength or not. I mean, basically, when you have a gut that's not doing its job, it's not pulling the right nutrients for one, you're certainly going to have effects. But you have to know that the gut also manages this, what's called skeletal homeostasis through metabolism and immune function. If you have a really angry gut and lots of bowel issues, you're likely not going to get the right nutrients as well as the right balance in terms of bone building, inflammatory response. In other words, you're going to have inflammation that works against the building of bone and the remodeling of bone. So you have a lot of balance of how the immune system works on the bone through the gut. And this is really kind of important. So instead of just thinking about the microbiota brain axis that we hear a lot, because those components of the microbes go through the bloodstream to the brain, you're talking about how this also can affect bone through the bloodstream as well. So the gut is a key player when it comes to keeping bones healthy. It's really important. The gut is really the entrance into the whole system of the human body, both endocrine and immune system. But certainly for this talk, I want people to understand that. So I want to get back into, oh God, my cat is now above me. I want to get into plastics. So again, keeping these chemicals out of your body serve your endocrine system and your immune system better. Perfumes, no matter if they're very expensive or they're cheap as can be, it doesn't matter. There is no regulation in terms of chemicals in our cosmetics that we use every day. We put on our skin, we use in feminine care products. So thinking about just plastic chemicals in shower curtains, but also in keeping fragrances lasting longer. Those are phthalates generally. And phthalates are a class, thousands of them, that actually keep scents lasting longer. And so I choose fragrance free wherever I can in terms of products. When it comes to perfumes, I choose products that now exist, perfumes that do have are phthalate free. And so all of these products are stemming from great science, new markets for better choices. And you can easily look some of these up on Yuka, Clearia, Healthy Living app. So these are, again, resources in the book, but I'm sharing them now that we have opportunities to look up our stuff before we buy them. Even candles, air fresheners, all of those contain large amounts of phthalates when they're tested by academic third-party testing. Because again, it's not going to be on the package and it certainly isn't going to be tested by manufacturing. So when it comes to plastics that we can avoid, not just like shower curtains, but what we, even eat from, think about the plastic resin codes that are on the bottom of food packaging. And this was actually designed, believe it or not, to make money by the plastics industry. And we're going to use these numbers that are on the bottom of our food containers and our water containers, right? Any plastic container will have these recycling codes. And the ones you want to really think about to stay away from are numbers 3, 6, and 7. 3 is essentially vinyl. We want to stay away from vinyl flooring, vinyl shower curtains, whatever vinyl you can avoid over time, that's a good thing. But certainly when it comes to food packaging, if you go out, honestly, if you go to like a Target or a Walmart or a supermarket and you just go to the applesauce section, take a look underneath at the triangles on all the plastic containers in that section. And you will see some have 5, some have 3s, some have 7s. Well, 3 is vinyl, so stay away from that if you can. 6 is polystyrene, it's styrofoam. And 7 is often other, but it really accounts for a lot of the BPA in plastic. So just avoiding 3, 6, and 7 is a great start if you're choosing foods that are packaged. And, start playing around with that because you'll start to get good at it. It's not like any one meal is going to kill you. It's, I'm not in the school. I don't play by the rules of, everything is going to kill you. That's not the way to go. It's really about layering in great information over time and really moving away from chemicals in a reasonable way. I sit here with colored hair talking to you. So, we are not perfect people. I assure you, it's about the process, and that's how the book is really laid out as well. BPA, which is an endocrine and immune disrupting chemical, has the ability to affect hormones as well as the immune system, is found in lots of different places. It was taken out of baby bottles, as I mentioned, but it's still in lots of different areas, including soda cans, even your favorite diet soda, food cans, even organic, even baby formula, which is hard to believe, right? But it's mostly in dust. It's on receipts, so I don't take receipts. I actually email them, or it seals ink on paper. So, BPA is typically used for any thermal paper like plane tickets and parking tickets and US currency and world currency. So I tend to not handle those. Now, if you are in an occupation, I have plenty of patients that work as cashiers. They tend to have some of the highest levels of BPA when tested in their urine. So I often will recommend that they wear, latex-free Band-Aids on their fingers while they're at work so they don't absorb a lot of these chemicals. So there's lots of hacks. It's really being conscientious of where they may come into your body and how you can just offset that.
And what about the BPA-free cans?
Doesn't exist, doesn't mean anything
What?
as far as I'm concerned. Well, because here's the thing, some of them do. I mean, the thing is like you never know. There's no regulation on this, but what happens is there's these regrettable substitutions, BPS, BPSIP, BPF. There were studies on, and these are called regrettable substitutions because again, it's a whack-a-mole. We've only had 5 to 11 chemicals removed out of the US market in its whole history. Whereas in Europe, up towards of 1,500 chemicals are not allowed because they have a much more stringent oversight and testing system. But when it comes to BPA, I wouldn't trust it. I really would stick to as much as I can away from cans and, stick to other types of products. Or if you have canned foods, I rinse my beans. I try to get the BPA off. There's all sorts of ways to try to limit. Even when I have packaged chicken and those kind of things packaged in plastics, I'll do a lot of rinsing,
Yeah.
So
I mean,
there's you can't be
I just want to say one thing. The Eden beans, a lot of people eat Eden beans, and they're such a great product. They're organic. They're cooked
yeah.
in kombu. They soak the beans overnight before they cook them, and they advertise them as BPA free. You're
Well,
saying,
here's the thing. Some of these, Eden may be one of them, but it's
mhm,
like 0.0001%. It costs more money to package BPA free packaging. It adds about 2 to 5 cents per can. So a lot of companies won't opt to do that. If they are doing BPA free, you don't know if they're using BPS. It may be true they're not using BPA, but they may be using BPS. And that has some of the similar outcome studies in terms of hormone disruption. So
so
it does.
what you're saying is instead of doing cans, buy the beans, cook them yourself, and
If you're a big bean eater, if it's a one-off, I wouldn't stress about it. But if you're really making this part of your diet, I would start to get into a culture of something that has less exposure to cans, if possible.
okay.
But again, these are personal choices, and you really want to weigh out your high yield choices versus the one-offs every once in a while type of exposures because it's a process.
Mhm.
In terms of personal care products, this is kind of easy, if you ask me, as compared to some food choices, because essentially you can look up on an app a better lipstick, a better tanning cream, a better hair shampoo. There's so much better that we now have available to us using those apps. And as I mentioned, teen kids, teenagers use the most chemicals per 24 hours. They have so many products. But reading things like phthalate free, avoiding fragrance and perfume, which is proprietary, is a good idea. And looking up Skin Deep. I do this with my high school students. I bring in bags of stuff from, the big box stores and they all take the products, then they download the apps and they do the looking up because we want to give them the fishing rod, not the fish. And I want these kids and everyone who reads my books to really have the ability to do this themselves without relying on brands. I don't endorse any brands or products, and it's not hard to do. But keeping in mind that we have plenty of great apps and plenty of good product lines that are very, very good at cleaning up some of their chemicals. Now, I put this in, I got to move a little faster because I'm running out of time. But, breast cancer, I put this in because it's just an example. I'll make it quick because we're really talking about bones. But I just wanted to emphasize the fact that breast cancer tends to be 90% is considered to be environmentally connected. 10% straight up genetic. And I say this because breast tissue is fatty and these chemicals like fats. They're lipophilic chemicals, many of them. So when I think about this and I think about sort of hormone changes in menopause, it's just something that comes together when it comes to bones as well. And these chemicals have the ability to do harm across the board. Why not think of them across the board, when making these choices, even with bone health?
Do you get
This,
a mammogram?
what'd you say?
You get a mammogram?
Do I get a mammogram
Yeah.
every year, an ultrasound every year, and an MRI every 3 years or 4 years? And I fight for it. I fight very hard for these tests.
Mhm.
But yes, this gentleman, if you want to listen to a great podcast episode, he did fine needle biopsies of 28 women
Mhm.
voluntarily. They had no history of breast cancer. They changed all their cosmetics and products. 28 days later, they all showed up voluntarily. He's a breast surgeon. He did repeat 28 biopsies on these women, and they all showed lower signal towards breast cancer. He did remarkable work. Now he's retired. This is a real hero in terms of how he got tissue to show that behavioral changes matter. And I think it's a wonderful conversation if people are interested. All right, air quality, easy to change out this, in my opinion. Stop buying junk that messes with the air fresheners, plug-ins, candles, incense. Really, we don't need these, and we breathe them in like oxygen right into our bloodstream. I tend to say get rid of carpeting and carpet backing. Try to, when you're ready for, change out in your home, change to ceramic floors from vinyl, those kind of things. But nothing is urgent. You want to work through these changes. This was my kids' daycare. I try to get people to think about getting rid of these pesticides. These signs are ridiculous to me. I mean, if you're looking at an X through children and pets, and it makes no sense. We should really not be buying into the concept that we need sprayed lawns. Water is so important, as I mentioned. We're made up of water. Water comes dirty to our homes from wastewater treatment plants. Even sewage becomes drinking water, runoff. This is all in the book, but really you want to control the water quality when it hits your home, and that would be water filtration, whether it's a well or it's municipal tap. Water contamination is so rampant. I don't think anyone puts time or thought into it. I wanted people to really think about it, but there's options. And even reverse osmosis, which I recommend because nephrologists use this for dialysis, like my father, since the 70s. It's the most aggressive way to clean water, and they're $275, even for the under the sink ones, with a plumber being $150. So it's really convenient and it's something I recommend. But any filtration, even a pitcher, which is carbon block, is better than nothing. No judgment. It's just a matter of your process and moving towards something a little more aggressive.
How about shower heads? Do you also have the shower heads in your home?
It can be carbon block, which are $20 in a major big box store. So, again, all these hacks I created to make sure people have options in the book in water. It's got tons of stuff to offer. Even testing your water, there's opportunities, but they're $300 tests, which are great. And I do them so that people know the answers to some of these questions. But I absorb that cost so you don't have to, so people can put money into the actual solutions, right? We want to be able to put our money towards food, towards filtration, for different products, those kind of things. And then carrying our water is just as important as the quality, in my opinion. So we don't want plastic water bottles and microplastics. We want to really think about glass and stainless steel. I take water bottles to dinner. It used to be weird. It's not weird to me. My kids don't even care. Like no one cares anymore. I just bring my water because I don't want to buy it and I don't want their water because I don't know where it came from. And it just makes me feel better.
Wow,
So,
that's a big takeaway. Thank you. Take
yeah.
courage to bring your own bottled water to dinner. I love that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
why not, right? It feels good. It really feels good, and you get into the habit, and then it becomes part of your culture. Sleeping is so important because we clear chemicals while we sleep. Very important to know the science on this. It's in the book, but really, we have this whole washout system. It's from the glymphatic system that does that. And so, again, anthropology, evolution is sprinkled out throughout this book because I wanted people to realize that we didn't just land here. We've been here for millions of years with some really great, detoxifying processes and great solutions. Exercise matters in terms of sweating, but also flooding the liver in terms of upregulating the detox systems. So I encourage that. Supplements are really important. I talk about the 4 fertilizer supplements in the book that I think every human should be on, but they're very basic. I mean, including a multivitamin and how to vet these out for quality and quantity. You need to know how to find good brands because that really matters no matter what supplements you use. But one of the interesting things is understanding how even probiotics work in the gut. That actually the gut microbiota of the gut relating to certain to higher risk for osteoporosis is really quite interesting, and there's some really great data on that. I used to have another osteoporosis talk, and I had a lot more on the probiotic component. But having a really basic probiotic that covers a lot of microbes that are living, that are a good brand, that are inexpensive, is not a bad thing unless you want to just entirely think about food as the source of your probiotic, which is perfectly doable. And I want people to think like that too. And there's lists of that in the book. But again, this whole gut dysbiosis issue has a lot to do with how bone formation and breakdown is in balance, even as we age. And as you can see, some of these modulators on the right is which kind of diet, how much exercise, what nutrients we may or may not be able to pull from food, and really feeding the ecosystem with, the bugs need food too, right? It's a whole ecosystem. So making sure you eat really healthy foods, pickles, vinegar, fermented foods is so great. Irma, you talk about all this stuff. So, and these are some of the foods that are listed in the book. So lots of different really yummy foods that feed the microbes in the gut and make them healthier. And so I wanted to talk about some of the mechanisms, but I think it's a little too heavy on the science. But these are some of the changes that we talked about during this talk about healthy water system, about getting rid of plastics wherever you can, getting rid of stain guard, non-stick chemicals. They end up in your gut, again, can disrupt the microbiome, among other things. And, vetting your cosmetics doesn't take much. Cleaning dust up doesn't take much. Cleaning your air by not buying products and certainly adding in, I talk about the 4 A's of environmental health in the book. Assess, which if I have a 50 questionnaire. Assess, avoid, or swap, which means reduce or, get rid of some products we just don't need, like 20 cleaning products or whatever we're told to have. Add is what we add into the human body to make it thrive. Exercise, sweat, sleep that's high quality, nutritious foods, cruciferous vegetables, certain supplements that are really critical. And then the fourth A of the four A's is actually allow. It's life. It's not always having access to the foods we wish we had. It's getting hair coloring. It's having birthday cake. It's also allowing your body to heal up from removing some of these exposures over time. It's a healing process. The take home message is chemicals aren't going away. We just have to learn to live with them and how to reduce them getting into our bodies. Okay. And there's lots of ways they do that. Going from high yield to low yield, drinking food and air is the top three ways we get this stuff in our system. But let's not forget about feminine care products, very absorptive vaginal canal. We need to teach our daughters and ourselves, we need to think about those products over the course of a lifetime and just swapping out to cleaner products. That's all. Low levels of these exposures do matter, especially over time, over a lifetime. And that lifestyle and certain avoidance, of certain products really does make a big difference in the blood levels and the urine levels that we test for in humans. These are my boys with my new dog, Charlie, who's running around. If you want to see a TED Talk that goes into this in a fun way, they're showing this actually in schools because it talks about the pilot projects that I did with these high schoolers. These were the two books that Irma showed, one on the left, which has actually 26 contributing authors, one on food additives, one on radiation. That's Deborah Davis. Waters. I mean, these are all the biggest specialists in the world that did the textbook. And then non-toxic was just myself and Fred. That was a guidebook. And then, of course, this is my new book, which I'm incredibly proud of and has lots of bells and whistles, including a 21-day plan to really get people started in a very reasonable way, very reasonable way. And also the Smart Human, which is my platform, is on everything you can think of, including the podcast, which I hope people will listen to. And that is it.
Wow. Okay. Let's take a
Whew,
breath, everybody.
mouthful. Sorry about all the details.
Okay. So can you take your slide deck down? There was one question. Do you recommend drinking distilled water?
Um, Great question. Distilled water, by definition, is just heated up water so it kills bacteria and viruses and microbes. So, by definition, you can heat up plastics in distilled water, technically, and it won't change the concentration of contaminants. So, I think of distilled water specifically more for infection risk, for immune compromised people. Remember, water typically comes in plastics, and so it can also leach plastics. So, I think when you're looking for bottled water, as I talk about in the book, you can look for reverse osmosis water from the water bottles. You just have to look for the ingredients on the water bottle, which most people don't even think to do.
So
Okay.
you mentioned this when you're going through an airport and you're picking up bottled water to look to see what kind of water it is and where it comes from. If it's tap, it's just been filtered. It's like, yeah, not a great choice.
You bet. I mean, we have options all over the place that we never see. My job was to bring that to people's attention so that you can make better choices without any effort.
So how do you clean your fruits and vegetables?
So I run them under RO water,
Mhm.
but I buy typically organic everywhere I can. Typically in season, they're cheapest, which I love. We have the farmers market, which I enjoy on Saturdays. You get tasting the strawberries from an organic farm is like it's like nothing like store-bought strawberries. It's so interesting to me and sharing with my kids, but we don't always have that opportunity. But I do the best I can. I buy a lot of organic in the plastic container. I have to do that. Also, frozen, ShopRite has frozen mixed berries, wild caught, that are incredible. So why not take advantage of ShopRite? I mean, it's across the country. And this is why that argument about organics being inaccessible or too expensive, I don't buy it. I mean, I've seen and sit there and look at pricing all the time, and I don't think that it makes sense anymore because every big box store has their own line of organic frozen produce.
So this is what we do in our house. So we have as much of a chemical-free house as possible, but we use essential oils. This is what we use. We're not selling anything, but we buy this glass bottle from Amazon. Can you see it? Because I'm seeing you. You can see me? Yeah? Okay. And then we add, so this is filtered water in here. Then we add thieves and orange, 10 drops of each. And that's what we use to clean our vegetables. And then when we do our dishes, we have the same glass bottle. We use this Dr. Bonner's, And then we add the essential oils, thieves and either lemon or orange. The one thing you also had mentioned that I wanted to bring up, you talked about dulse. You talked about iodine, the importance of iodine, right? So I wanted to just bring that up, that dulse is a great idea to sprinkle it on foods to get the iodine. It has a salty taste to it, but this is a great idea as far as a go-to that Allie had mentioned in a previous conversation. So how do you tell if tea bags have plastic?
So they all have plastic unless they're proven otherwise, right? Because you never know what's made in them, right? Rayon is a very common one. Silk can also be covered in some type of plastic. But here's what I do. I use loose leaf, organic. I use a stainless steel diffuser.
Mhm.
I use, I look at habits, and I talk about this in the book. When you do the survey in the first chapter, so when you're starting to kind of see where you're exposed, because you got to start with the starting point, right? So the 50 questions are great because you can put numbers and you can add it up and see where you're beginning this journey. But when it comes to habits, that's your high yield exposures, right? That's every day. So why not start there and not worry about as much the minutia of birthday parties and, coloring and all that stuff. What I do is I try to work through the highest yield to, the less frequent exposures and why those matter. So again, tea bags. I love my tea. I'm not a coffee drinker. My husband uses a French press. Um, and he's been through the whole K-cup thing, reluctantly switching. But listen, it's a process for all of us. So, USDA organic tea bags, coffee is a must, creamer, sugar, whatever we use, we really do stick to that rule. And again, I'm not saying everyone who doesn't do that is a bad person and how dare you. It's more about what do you want to use your resources, your time and effort, what matters to you, and just moving in that direction.
Okay. Um, is silicone a safe storage product like stashers? Are they good?
So it's a great question. So when you think about silicone, I think of baby bottle nipples, right? And one of the safest, if there is such a thing as safe plastics, would be medical grade silicone. Now, whether or not food packaging silicone is at that level is unclear. So I can't vouch for the quality of that plastic. There's no, again, oversight on this. There's no regulation. There's no third party testing. And so, look, if you have no other choices and that's what you choose, that's, I guess, a reasonable way to go. But I would say glass is a better way to go. Stainless steel, even with a plastic lid where it doesn't touch your food or your drink, much better options, I think, because the matrix is less friable and you won't get those chemicals, no matter what's in them, into your food and drink.
What do you think about cast iron pans?
Oh, I think they're great. Great source of iron. Hard to manage if you don't cook. Like I don't like to cook that much, but cast iron's fantastic. It's a wonderful source of iron, especially in people who are iron deficient. So just make sure you're not iron overloaded for any reason. So, but it's a wonderful option and certainly better than nonstick for sure.
Taking DMSA for provoked heavy metals tests, is there a way to clean up that will be released into my body from bones, organs, etc.? So as far as the detoxing, how does one take
Yeah, I go into detail on that in the book. I don't know if that this is very independent, very person specific, exposure specific, level specific, which test they use. And I do have a lot of this in the book and how I go about testing if it's necessary. I don't do a lot of chemical testing in patients because we're all contaminated. That's the punchline is that we have a lot of these chemicals in our body and it changes day to day, meal to meal, wherever we go. We go to New York, we go to this, we have this meal, we go out to dinner, we don't, we use this canned foods, we didn't. So there's such variability that when you test, unless you need that to motivate you, which some people do, that's okay. And there are tests that you can even do through your insurance, which I have in the book. I even have the ICD-10 codes to hand to your doctor so that you can use your own insurance to test things that a lot of people are doing for outside labs and paying a fortune. I want people to spend their money on the right stuff. So I'm trying to make sure people are asking for the right stuff from healthcare providers that are willing to, order these tests if they're necessary.
so just to repeat, so you use the basic tests that are basically covered by insurance. versus some of the fancier tests. Look,
Yeah, and they're in the book too. Those options that are vetted in terms of good outside labs. I have those too, but I really want people to think about, I see so many patients, unfortunately, it makes me want to cry sometimes, that get so taken advantage by the wellness system. And look, Western medicine has its issues, and the health and wellness side of things has their issues. Um, but I do think spending thousands of dollars on testing is criminal. And I can't say much about it because these are colleagues, and it's a hard thing to judge other people's prescribing process, right? I don't want to be judged either, but I just see too much of testing that can really make people, lose a lot of money when that money could really be put towards the solution, as I mentioned. Again, this is just my general feeling. Not every doctor is bad. Not every health and wellness or Western doctor is bad. Of course not. But I'm just saying I've seen over 22 years of rheumatology and integrated medicine work that there's just a lot of people spending a lot of money on things that are variable day to day and can really just get right to the changes.
you see a lot of osteoporotic patients, or is more osteoporosis coming into your practice?
Can I say more? I don't know if I could say more. I see a lot of chronic illness connected to osteoporosis. Metabolism matters, immune system health matters. The general health of a human being in terms of bone processing it matters. So again, these recommendations, the nutritional chapter, the food chapter, the things that I want people to think about is about a global picture of being healthier, doing very basic changes that play into bone, no question about it. There's a big push, by the way, now in terms of the menopause world with HRT. That's taken a huge life of its own, by the way, in terms of some of the data that was, I think, misread, mismanaged, mispublished in terms of HRT risk. But I will say that that's for another time in terms of how individuals go about choosing that. So we don't have time today, but there's just so much more available now, I think, in terms of getting us feeling better and managing bone. I will say one thing. This is something I want to make mention. We worry a lot about the bone densities, right? And Irma, you've, I think, heard me say this, right? Bone densities matter. It's the only thing we have. They're standardized. They're geared towards 30-year-old women. There's a whole bunch of issues in terms of just who you are getting into that machine. But no one spends as much time as they should on not falling in the first place. Bone densities are a number. They're a risk number. But if you are having hearing problems, vision problems, you're on blood pressure medicine that's way too tightly controlled as it shouldn't be after 65, you need higher blood pressure to get to your brain. We are have too much pharmacy on board with blood pressure trying to titrate us down to a 30-year-old. I mean, over 65, you need a little bit higher blood pressure, believe it or not. Data shows this. Knee arthritis that makes you buckle, poor shoes choice, not having upper body strength to catch yourself when you fall. All of those things are before you even fall. So we need to emphasize much more on not falling in the first place and not spending too much fear and concern as much, I think, on the actual numbers. Those numbers matter, but I just think that it's heavily weighted towards pharmacology right away.
Absolutely. Yes, we talked about that years ago, and absolutely fall prevention and picking up those rugs. And in fact, most of us get up in the middle of the night. That's what I was wondering. All that water, you're not getting up in the middle of the night?
Um, I get up in the middle of the night because I've just got a dog and a cat on my head. But besides that,
Yeah.
listen, you can time it out. You want to drink your water throughout the day and really unload before nighttime for sure, because you want to have good rested sleep, as I said, because it helps your immune system through clearing a lot of these chemicals. So everything you can do to protect your sleep. And again, there's a whole section on that and how to improve sleep. We just want to work on these things without, major cleanses, major diets. This is not what it's about. It's about
Right.
lifestyle.
But I want to say a couple of things. First of all, clearing the area from your bed to your bathroom is key. And forgetting to pick up a little pair of socks is key because people trip very, very easily.
Yes.
The one thing I wanted
Lighting is key. Lighting is so critical. Having
to,
lights on your whole walk to the bathroom. I mean, the littlest things make people fall. And that's kind of what I'm saying is that whether it's over medication, poor hydration, knee arthritis, buckling, and not handling that knee issue that you're struggling with, vision loss, hearing loss. Our senses are so critical, our upper body strength. All these things take a little bit of time and effort to consider before saying that your T score of 3.0 is going to kill you, you know?
Right. Um, does your book address parchment paper?
It's in there, parchment paper, and there's also parchment papers that you can look up on EWG that have no PFAS. So again, there's layers. Parchment paper is great, but what if there's any chemicals on parchment paper? So you want to at least be conscious of that. So EWG.org is great. Looking up these products are great.
And what's the amount of calcium that you recommend? Because everybody has a different number.
Well, I think it's individualized to the person because if you have a history of any cardiac disease, you want to make sure that you're looking into that just, because you don't want calcification of the heart vessels. So there's lots of questions there. But we now scale back on calcium because we should be getting it really as much as we can from food.
Right.
If we can source that, but we're not at the level of men. Men shouldn't have any calcium really as a supplementation in general. They should be getting some calcium from food, but not typically supplementation at the level women are typically told. And there's other substitutes for calcium in terms of supplements. So,
You
but
don't look at it like you have a general target of 750 milligrams or no, you
there's
don't.
no such thing in my world as targeted anything. Like even vitamin D, as I talk about in the book, we all talk about how much each person should take. Well, it's not how much you should take; it's how much you need to take to get to a blood level that's high normal
Right.
and live at that level all the time. And that has a lot to do with your gut and absorption. It has a lot to do with your food quality. It has a lot to do with if you're supplementing. It has a lot to do with medications you're on that might be blocking it. So again, it's very individualized what each person's D3 should be as an example. But I'm measuring blood levels to see if you're living in this 60 to 80, 60 to 90 range of a normal being 30 to 100.
60 to 90 D.
Yeah, a 60 to 90 blood level. Yeah. You want to be at high normal, not low normal.
It's interesting because that's a very controversial 60 to 90 is more the
It's not going to affect your parathyroid if you're a normal, healthy person. I mean, that's the argument. It's going to mess up your calcium. You really just want to be high normal, not higher than normal.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
So I can't respectfully disagree because I don't have the facts and figures that you do, but I know that we're looking at other people 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter on vitamin D3.
Yeah, you're not aiming to knock the stars out, but you're really looking at aiming for higher because that look, I'm an immune disease specialist, as you know, D is so critical to lupus. We have millions of, we know it's a part of every immune disease process. We don't get enough of it anthropologically. We're not seeing enough of it. We're blocking it with sunscreen. So to me, D is one of those things where, the minutia of, 40, 60 or 60 to 80, you're going to be variable anyway between 6-month intervals of testing. So you just want to aim for a reasonably high number.
Okay, so two more questions. Debbie is asking, would you say that silicone cooking tools are not suitable because they are not only food grade and not medical grade? Because they are only food grade and not medical grade.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It took me a year after changing out my nonstick pans to realize that I was still cooking with those spatulas. And I realized, why am I doing that when I can use bamboo or stainless steel on a stainless steel pan? So to me, it's not even I don't know how to research. Every company does not reveal what their plastics are made of, period, end of story. So I would just switch the material to something with a different, lower risk.
In your book, you were talking about how you cook broccoli, which I thought was pretty interesting. That you cut it up, you let it hang out for a little while to get the air so that the sulforaphane is better when you cook it. Do I understand that correctly?
So you're basically letting enzymes like miracinase and some other chemicals really break down and release the compounds that are so valuable. So when we cook, we want to at least chop up broccoli and let it stand. I think I said 30 to 40 minutes was the science. And that allows it to be more powerful in terms of our exposure to that chemical in our food. So yeah, there's science on that too. It's very interesting. And again, powerhouse cruciferous vegetables, they're powerhouses when it comes to detoxification.
So is that the same formality that you do with all cruciferous vegetables? You cut them up and you let them hang out for a while?
I think broccoli is the most well studied for that particular issue. I would say trying to give it some air, at least for other cruciferous vegetables, would be worthy, but I don't think they're as well studied.
Okay. So as we wrap up, what Dr. Cohen was talking about in her book is assess your situation, look around what's happening. This is not like, oh my gosh, I have to throw away my husband. You know, there are certain things that you have to should consider
Don't test
clearing
them.
out. Then avoid them as much as possible so that when you're aware of what it is that you want to avoid, you can make consumer choices or smarter choices, and then add back the stuff, the organic, and getting rid of some of the utensils and going with stainless steel and cast iron, and then allow the hiccups in life that happen when you go out to eat or you're dyeing your hair or whatever it is, that's what human life is all about. So are sprouts as nutrient as the grown plant? Ooh,
Well, broccoli sprouts are considered highly nutri I mean, almost like something like 10 to 20 times more.
crazy the way they talk about broccoli sprouts. But
Yeah, I mean, you can even grow them yourself. I don't have the time or bandwidth for that, but you can certainly get them at stores. But broccoli sprouts tend to have higher levels. It's just they're not as accessible, or I guess I'm not used to making them. But people do love broccoli sprouts, and they do have higher levels of these compounds that are so valuable.
and the sprouts are so easy to do if you have the seeds and you have the jar and you put a little cover on it, you put some holes
Right.
in it. I mean, it's really, really simple. It's a fun thing to do with grandchildren. Is there any safe nonstick pan?
Um, the world of pans, like everything else, unregulated. I couldn't tell you any brands that I know of, because you need the third party testing. So unless they're transparent, they reveal that on their websites and ceramic are interesting too, because you really need vetted ceramics so that you don't have elevated lead and some of these overseas contaminants in ceramics. So I tend to really just stick with stainless steel, 18/8 food grade. You can get it at Marshall's, you can get it at TJ Maxx. You just need one. Cephalon's a great, like whatever. I mean, you just need a good stainless steel pan or two. And it just takes a little bit more elbow grease to clean it. But nonstick, it's a product of convenience, like all the other stuff we now have to manage to put back in the bottle, right? So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of going to, the old school processes again a little bit.
I'm a caregiver and need to use disposable gloves.
I use nitrile in my practice. Nitrile is latex free. And yeah, I use them because I have to. There's no good substitute for exam gloves that I know of.
No stainless steel for nickel allergies. So that's interesting. Nickel allergies. It says no stainless steel for nickel
Yeah,
allergies.
because Nickel is part of that 18/8. That's a very clever person that just said that.
Very clever, Carol. Very clever.
Yeah, very clever, because that's when you look at food grade, it's a combination, I think, of nickel and steel. It's in my other book, but essentially, yeah, I'm taking it for granted. Most people don't have nickel allergies, but if you do, certainly that can be a component for jewelry, no doubt. But not, it depends on how much of an allergy you have in terms of reactivity.
How about microwaves? Do you use them?
Oh yeah.
Hello.
I got
Yes.
to survive. I got two teenage boys. But yeah, here's the thing. What I worry most about with microwaves is sort of killing off nutrition more so than adding a chemical of any sort. I mean, I don't want to degrade compounds that are really excellent. So steaming is always a better choice. No doubt about it.
Steam from it. And what about air fryers?
You have to be glass,
Have to be,
cannot be plastic.
no, air fryers. So what do you mean it has
Yeah,
to be?
they can be used, but I'm saying the container is really the most important with air fryers in terms of just the heated up interior.
Ours is stainless steel.
Yeah, stainless steel, I mean, assuming that would be great, and then now they have glass ones.
Yeah.
I didn't know they had glass one. We use glass in our stainless steel air fryer. It's all right. So we talked about water. We talked about how important it is to have the filtration system. You recommend reverse osmosis, absolutely under the sink. When I spoke to a water guy, he said, "No, no, no. Those under the sinks, they don't work. You need the whole house." Now he could be trying to sell me on something, but he said, "Mm-mm." But
Well, let's put it this way. I've spent the money on pre and post testing for my RO filter, and it's never going to be perfect, but it's certainly pretty darn good. And then I have actually a pitcher, one of the old Brita filter pitcher things that I'd bought years back, and I didn't want, I was too cheap to throw away all these expensive drop-ins. So I actually fill up my pitcher from my RO filter because I'm so obsessed with clean water. Now, mind you, there may be microplastics. That's the next iteration of rating systems in terms of, and they're working on this actively because I've met with these companies. But the idea is that as long as plastics are generally kept at a comfortable temperature and not heated and put into your dishwasher, that's where you keep those in better shape anyway.
So whenever you have glass jars, rinse them out and use them as storage. That's what we do. We have glass jars all over the place, and that's just a great, cheap way of storing food. Um, what you said something is like water. I'm obsessed. I think what you're doing is allowing people to be obsessed and saying, no, I'm going to do that. I'm going to carry my water. I'm going to do these things. And I think if we change the dialogue around that, not being obsessed, but being proactive, I'm taking care of myself, my body, my bones, my children, my dogs. I think that that's a great approach. So thank you.
Yeah, this is about empowerment. I mean, if anyone's ever heard me on a podcast, like I'm telling you, I've been on the ledge. I've been doing this work for 15 years. I live in the world that everyone here listening lives in. It is not easy in a world we created. But guess what? We can also pull ourselves out of it in a very reasonable way. I test myself all the time so I don't have to test patients. I know what behaviors, I remember eating tons of chocolate 2 months, and I had all this chocolate from Iceland, and it was all I changed. And my cadmium levels were really high. And then I stopped eating the chocolate, and my cadmium levels dropped. So now what? Guess what? The literature supports, know your chocolate and watch the cadmium, and here's how to do it. The idea is that no one should have to test all the time to know these changes. I just put them in the book. I want people to know really reasonable stuff that's not, that's evidence based.
I mean, this opens up a little bit of a can of worms for me that I have to go into because I have heavy metals, can't get rid of them. I have it all. Mercury, lead, cadmium, did the chelation. I think I read in your book that you slowly got rid of your heavy metals through your own process of water and food.
Yeah, I mean, I really just look at that. Look, when I see patients, I do an environmental health history on them, which is what we should all be doing, right? But medicine isn't trained that way. And there's not enough time in a 15-minute visit to really get to those questions, right? That's why those questions are in the book, so you can do it yourself. So the idea is you want to get a little bit of an environmental health history, but you want to ask the right questions. And that's why there's a 50-question survey that's as simple and reasonable as anyone could ask for. And that's a starting point.
Right.
And then you kind of can use that as your working list of things to move, to work through. So I just think that whatever people come to me all the time. People ask me questions about all their exposures. They're getting tests again that I have to question the lab itself sometimes. You also need to repeat elevated levels because labs make mistakes. And, one test result does not a disease make, right?
I think you have to say that again because we get so caught up in a test result, one test result, and oftentimes they're, oh, no, often, well,
And
you
not,
know,
I will tell you this, that, in medicine, I was trained never treat the lab, treat the person. You need to understand the patient. You need to have the history, the context. You need to have more information than simply just looking at. Now, if you're pregnant, I would say you're pregnant. Okay. But aside from pregnancy, there's a lot of, variation to a lot of labs, certainly ANAs and all of the immune system testing that I see over time. And I think people need to have that contextualized with a decent history, and really understand their, and then repeat the labs too, because again, a lot of people get upset over labs that are elevated for one reason or another. And I think it's really important to make sure that you repeat labs that are elevated in a reasonable period of time, in order to make sure that that's as real of a lab as it should be or could be, and
it's
ask the right questions. Yeah.
in particular that causes ferritin to jump high.
Well, that's inflammation. It's an acute phase reactant. It goes up with inflammation. So, that can be an issue, but then there's also rheumatologic conditions like Stills, and there's other things that need to be evaluated with ferritin. In and of itself, ferritin has lots of questions. Again, this is the medical questions coming out, but
All right, so we're going to stop there. So what I will say this is the book is great. What I'm particularly enjoying is the Audible book. But if you're a note taker, get the book, and just a tremendous resource. So thank you,
my
Allie.
pleasure. Thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate it.
So lots and lots of good feedback. So
Great.
thank you. I don't know if you could read in the comments.
And if you do get the book, can I mention one thing? I have a lot of the chemical industry putting in nice choice reviews because they're not liking the work I'm doing, which is flattering in and of itself, by the way. But not really when it comes to the numbers. So if you actually get the book and you feel compelled to give it a decent, whatever you want to do in terms of rating, it does help in this general, I don't want to say battle, but it is really,
It's a
you
battle.
it's a battle. It's a battle. And I don't sell products and I don't, endorse brands and I don't do anything but academics and education. That's my jam. But there's some really bad people out there. So be conscious of that. And if you feel compelled to support the book and the work, I appreciate it.
And we could say we're obsessed by it. All right.
Nice.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for being here and thank you for staying the whole time. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Ellie.
Be
Bye-bye.
well, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks, Irma.
You're welcome, Ellie. Bye-bye. Hi there. This is Irma Jennings. And if you enjoyed this video with Dr. Cohen, please do me a favor and subscribe to my YouTube channel, like, and make a comment. All these efforts on your part will help the information get out there. And that's what we're all about, sharing content that is important for our bones, for our health, and for our life. Thank you very much.